can know itself by itself and reveal everything else. But here know is used in two different senses. Know everything in the sense of knowledge, vritti jnana, and know itself only in the sense of swaprakasha, self-luminosity. The Upanishads, Kathopanishad, says, Tameva bhantam anubhati sarvam tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. That shining, everything else shines. By its light, everything here is revealed. Consciousness shining, everything else shines. By consciousness, the light of consciousness, everything here is revealed. Consciousness shining, what else shines? Mind shines. The sense organs shine. And through the mind and the sense organs, all the objects are revealed. Consciousness may be shining, but what about me? You are consciousness. You shining, everything else shines. By your light, everything here is revealed. We sing in the Arati, at the end, Namo Namo Prabhu. So, Ujala Ridikandara, that which shines in the heart of all of us, and that reveals everything, that which dispels the darkness of the heart. Manovachanaika Adhar, that which reveals mind and speech, that is consciousness. And Vakya Manatita, that which mind and speech cannot reveal, because consciousness is not an object. And yet mind and speech are revealed and they act and they work because of the presence of consciousness. This consciousness, you are. You already are this. Not that you have to become this. You already are this consciousness. Why don't we see it? The example of the movie screen is very nice. That, I've told this story earlier. I heard it from a monk actually in Haridwar. He said that imagine there is a boy who has not seen a film and his father takes him to a city to see a film, and they enter the cinema hall and the movie has already started. And just like our life, we are thrown into life, already life has started. We don't see it from the beginning. And then you enter the cinema hall and the movie is started and the boy is watching the movie. The father has explained to the boy that there is a screen on which the pictures and pictures will be there, there will be sound, and you can see this is a movie. After some time the boy asks, at first the boy is engrossed in the movie. Just like us, we are engrossed in life. Then we ask the big questions. What is the meaning of all this? Now, what is happening here? What is the purpose of it? What is reality here? The boy asks, where is the screen? And the father whispers, there. So, is it that character, that hero of the movie, that's the screen? No. Behind the hero. So behind the hero, there's the road and the vehicle. Behind that, there is the sky. The sky is the screen. No. It is all of it. So sky and the vehicle and the road and the cop and the robber, all of them are the screen. No. Apart from that, you just remove all of that, that's the screen. So nothing is the screen. How will the father explain it to the son? Because everywhere he points, there is a picture. Everywhere you point, there is vritti jnana. How to distinguish the screen from the picture? How to distinguish the background consciousness from the vritti jnana? Vritti jnana means the
being actually God is also perfect.
Grace, assuming you believe in God, we attain the state of liberation. Where do we end up? What does that look like, this beautiful, blissful state of salvation? Most schools of Vedanta claim that salvation is mukti, which means liberation. Liberation from what? Freedom from what? From rebirth. Because we have not realized the highest truth, which is Brahman, we have to come back again and again in new physical bodies and work out our karma. But when we attain liberation, we're free from the cycle of rebirth. But there's one school at least, Achinta Bheda Bheda Vedanta, remember that's Chaitanya school, which holds that the supreme goal, the highest goal, is not mukti. It's not liberation from rebirth. It's bhakti, supreme love of God. But then you might ask, well, what do they have to say about mukti? Do these supreme lovers of God not get mukti? No. Mukti, liberation from rebirth, according to this school, is an incidental byproduct of attaining supreme love for God. It's called tucca phala. course, it comes along. It's like just a kind of, you get a bonus, like a free packet. When you buy something very expensive, they give you a free product along with it just to kind of make you think that you're getting something really nice. Okay, now, the different schools of Vedanta differ on two key questions relating to salvation. And I want to talk about that briefly. Number one, what is the precise nature of salvation? What does it look like? And second, is it possible to attain Jivan Mukti? Jivan Mukti means liberation while still in this physical body. And different schools answer these questions in different ways. First question, what is the precise nature of salvation? According to two schools, Advaita Vedanta of Shankara and Bhaskara's Aupadika Bheda Veda, no sense of individuality remains in the liberated state. We don't remain as individuals in any sense whatsoever. The individual soul in the state of liberation merges completely in Brahman. Whether you understand Brahman as Nirguna Brahman like Shankara or as Saguna Brahman like Bhaskara, but in either case, you don't remain as an individual soul, as an entity separate from Brahman. But every other school of Vedanta holds that individuality in some sense remains even in the state of salvation. And more concretely, what they say is that, these are bhakti schools of Vedanta, what they say is that when you attain liberation, you finally are able to reside in an eternal heaven called Loka in Sanskrit. And you eternally worship and serve the personal God. So if the school is based on love of Krishna, then it's a Loka called Goloka or Vrindavana, where you lovingly worship and serve Krishna, and it's eternal. The individual soul remains there for an eternity. So that's an important difference. And in Advaita Vedanta, remember, Shankara says there's no coming and going. You don't go to anywhere. He thinks that's a kind of a silly idea. So instead he says that ultimately you just rest in your true nature, which is non-dual pure consciousness. So these are two fundamentally different paradigms for understanding the nature of post-mortem salvation. Second question, is Jivan Mukti, liberation while in the physical body, possible? Now, let's first focus on Advaita Vedanta because I think it's interesting. When I was a PhD student, I had a Facebook account. I don't have one now. But when I had Facebook, I remember under relationship status, one of the options was, it's complicated. And I think that if you ask Advaita Vedantins, do you accept liberation while still in the physical body? They'll say, it's complicated. Why do I say that? Because according to Shankara's school, this entire world of names and forms, including our physical bodies, are products of ignorance. Okay, now that's the first step. Second, let's imagine that I've attained the knowledge of Brahman. How do they define knowledge of Brahman? It means that you've completely eradicated ignorance. That's how they themselves define it, technically. Okay? Now, if you really eradicate ignorance completely, then the products of ignorance should also disappear. And if the physical body is a product of ignorance, there should be no physical body upon the attainment of complete liberation. So this is in a nutshell, the philosophical problem with justifying the possibility of Jivan Mukti, liberation while still in the physical body, from the standpoint of Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. And I don't want you to think that this is just because maybe, people who are opponents of Shankara say this. Shankara's own followers have grappled with this question for centuries and come up with, they acknowledge the problem. And I'll just mention a few examples. Madhusudana Saraswati and a number of others, Chitsukha and others. What they do is they say, yes, Jivan Mukti is possible. Liberation while in the physical body is possible. But even the Jivan Mukta has a trace of ignorance. Avidya Lesha, it's called in Sanskrit. Even the Jivan Mukta has a trace of ignorance which accounts for the continued existence of this physical body and the continued appearance of this illusory world. Okay? But then the question is, well, if the Jivan Mukta has a trace of ignorance, in what sense is he or she completely liberated? He's not completely liberated. And so you may as well say, we don't believe in Jivan Mukti. so this is why I say the answer from the standpoint of Advaita Vedanta is it's complicated. What about non-Advaitic schools of Vedanta? They adopt many different stances on this question. Do they accept Jivan Mukti? Ramanuja's school of Vishishtadvaita and Nimbarkar's school of Swabhavika Bheda Veda completely reject the possibility of Jivan Mukti. But remember, part of the reason is because for them, these are bhakti schools of Vedanta, the ultimate state is one of residing in an eternal heaven with the personal God, in serving and lovingly worshipping Vishnu or Krishna. And this world is certainly not that. We're not living in a heaven, unfortunately. Okay. Now, Madhva also rejects the possibility of Jivan Mukti. But one thing to keep in mind is that even Ramanuja, Madhva, they all believe in God realization while in the physical body. To do with spiritual practices. Which spiritual practice leads us most directly to the knowledge of Brahman? And for many centuries, the different schools of Vedanta have been at loggerheads over this question, and they tend to say that one yoga, one kind of sadhana, spiritual practice, is higher than the other ones. Okay? So there are all sorts of hierarchies of spiritual practices. Another point, which I think is very important and which I think is underemphasized. Many of these Vedantic schools use the same terms to describe different spiritual practices. Jnana yoga, the yoga of knowledge. Bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion toward the personal God. Karma yoga. They don't always mean the same thing by these terms. And so you have to when you talk about Jnana yoga, for instance, the first question to ask is, Jnana yoga from whose standpoint? Ramanuja's standpoint? Meditate on that deeply. And ultimately that should result in the knowledge of Brahman. But what about Vishishtadvaita Vedanta? Ramanuja also accepts Jnana Yoga, but in a different sense. He says that Jnana Yoga is a practice of meditating on your true nature as an eternal soul, an eternal individual soul, separate from the body-mind complex. Okay, and I'm going to talk about this just in a bit. He also puts Jnana Yoga on, he says it's a preliminary discipline which makes you eligible to practice the higher discipline of Bhakti Yoga. So he kind of turns the table on Shankara here. But I'm jumping the gun here. So first of all, how does Shankara's school of Advaita Vedanta hierarchize? How do they explain and relate the different spiritual practices? According to Shankara's school, Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, is the only direct path to knowledge of Brahman. What about Karma Yoga? What about Bhakti Yoga, the path of selfless action, the path of devotion for the personal God? He says they're good, they're not useless, but they only lead indirectly to the highest goal by purifying the mind and making the mind concentrated. So again, we can think about, it's like Shankara believes that bhakti is for inferior spiritual aspirants who are not yet up to the task of engaging in jnana yoga, the practices of jnana yoga. And he also claims that karma yoga and jnana yoga cannot be practiced at the same time by any particular person. So he reconciles these yogas, but sequentially, he says that karma yoga and bhakti yoga are meant for inferior spiritual aspirants. Once I attain total purity of mind, I stop practicing bhakti yoga, I stop practicing karma yoga, and I just focus exclusively on jnana yoga. And until I am eligible to practice jnana yoga, I shouldn't practice jnana yoga at all. So there's no question of practicing both jnana yoga and bhakti yoga and karma yoga at the same time. This is Shankara's view. What about Ramanuja? As I just anticipated a little earlier, Ramanuja just turns the tables on Shankara. He says, oh Shankara, you're saying that jnana yoga is the higher practice, bhakti is the lower practice. The truth is that bhakti yoga is the highest practice and jnana yoga is just a kind of feeder discipline. It's a kind of preparatory discipline. So what Ramanuja says is, through the practice of jnana yoga, meditation on your true nature as an eternal individual soul, which is the child of God, understood as a personal God, he says, it's only after you attain this realization, which he calls Atma Avalokanam, your realization of the individual eternal soul within your heart. It's only then that you can actually feel true bhakti, true love for God, because it's the soul that feels bhakti for God. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, imagine that God is like a giant magnet, an infinitely powerful magnet, and the soul, imagine, is like a needle. The soul is naturally attracted to the magnet. But then you might ask, well, why aren't we attracted? Why don't we feel that attraction? Because of